Hello, everyone. This is Rise Up, AAPI Excellence, a podcast devoted to celebrating the experiences, challenges, and success of the AAPI community. I'm your host, Dr. Xuan Wang-Wolf. I'm very pleased today to be joined by my guest, Amrit Ahluwalia, the editor-in-chief at the EvoLLution. Amrit, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, Swan, thank you so much for having me. My name is Amrit Ahluwalia. I'm the editor-in-chief of the EvoLLution. Just for a little background, the EvoLLution is an online newspaper focused on the evolving higher education space that was launched and funded by Modern Campus, a company dedicated to student-first technologies in the higher ed space.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. So what is well, you introduced a little bit about evolution. So would you like to talk a little bit more about it in
Yeah, of
detail?
course. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're really proud of it. Obviously, this is a publication that we founded 10 years ago, with the intention of shining a light on the higher ed space in a different way. That period was really interesting. So we're talking kind of 2010, 2011, and the higher ed space is still benefiting from the 2007 to 2009 Great Recession. Enrollments are up, folks are still struggling to get back into the labor market, but we're starting to peak into the recovery. So folks are starting to go back to work, enrollments are starting to decline. And you have a lot of higher ed leaders who recognize that, well, we've redesigned our business models over the past 5 years to be reliant more on student tuition and fees than on state subsidies, because state subsidies were slashed enormously through the Great Recession. And at that time, we saw a lot of really interesting transformation happening in the continuing education space. These are divisions that are focused on non-traditional learners. They're more focused around accessibility into the institution from folks that might be underserved or unserved. They have to be entrepreneurial, they have to be agile, they have to be flexible. So we're sharing stories from leaders of continuing education in non-traditional divisions about entrepreneurialism in the post-secondary space, about being student first, about what it takes to transition and to recognize and adapt to the challenges of new business models. At the same time, the main campuses were trying to figure that out. So when we launched, we really thought we'd be kind of a blog for continuing education. Everything we publish is either written by or contributed by folks in the industry, actual leaders of higher education divisions and institutions. So again, we really thought that we'd be a continuing ed blog. And then one day we looked at our subscriber base and realized that a significant portion of our subscribers were presidents and provosts and CIOs, because at exactly the time where they were trying to figure out how to be agile, how to adapt to a new environment, we were publishing articles that were exactly about that in the post-secondary space. So, we kind of recognized that we might be onto something and just kind of ran with it.
That's awesome. What a timely, contribution by the evolution. Sometimes, opportunities just happen like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
When it actually feels a need, especially, now, like you said earlier, higher ed institutions are, trying to pivot to the continuing ed, the professional, ed field. And it's really important for our, learners to be able to meet the needs of the employment and workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is really the great contribution. And looking yeah, I'm obviously a subscriber for the evolution as well, and I benefited a lot throughout the years. Thank you all for offering it in the first place. So tell me a little bit more about your journey and of how that leads you, your educational journey or career journey, how it leads you to become the editor-in-chief at EvoLLution.
For sure. Well, I mean, I think just like everybody else in the non-traditional higher ed space, I kind of fell into it backwards. And I think if you ask any continuing education leader, they'd all tell you the same thing, that continuing ed wasn't really where they saw themselves ending up, but as it turned out, wound up being the perfect spot for them. I was raised in Ottawa, born and raised in Ottawa, Canada, which is probably, well, it's about 6 hours, 7 hours north of Buffalo. I went to school. I went to school at a very traditional institution. I went to school at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. I did my postgraduate work at McMaster University in Hamilton.
Mhm.
And I had the opportunity because I'd worked on the paper at Queens. Now, if I think about that experience, what's interesting is that was a co-curricular, but it took 50 to 60 hours a week easily. As a section editor for a major section in that newspaper, I was managing a staff of 15 to 20 writers. We published a 2 times a week publication, not including online issues. So, but I didn't get any credit for it, right? I got no academic recognition for that work whatsoever. I got nothing on my transcript would suggest that I built any skills in that field at all. But arguably, I would say, at least in my 4th year, I probably spent more time focused on the newspaper than I did on my actual studies. And I would say, arguably, that work is what best prepared me to become a successful member of the labor force, whether, I happened to land in a publication. But the skill sets in terms of being able to manage large groups of people, the skill sets in terms of being able to maintain multiple sort of ongoing projects that had both, short-term and long-term needs, that kind of stuff is I think really what your average employer is looking for. And I always think about that, and I think it's so interesting that the one thing I did at university that best prepared me for the labor market, no one could ever look at my transcript or ever look at my post-secondary experience and recognize that it was there. But anyway, so I did that work. A friend of mine wound up taking this role at Modern Campus. Well, what was then Destiny Solutions? It's now a company called Modern Campus.
Mhm.
And they felt that they desperately wanted to start a community for continuing education leaders, right? This is a group of people that's incredibly disparate. They're spread out all over the place. And well, she knew me from the paper and thought that could be a good fit. And in my own walk, my mother is a non-traditional student, right? So she, when she immigrated to Canada, she had a bachelor's degree in chemistry. She'd worked as a stewardess, and when she went to the Employment Canada office to say, "I have my bachelor's degree in chemistry. I've had an incredibly complex work history as a 20-something, with a huge amount of responsibility, a huge amount of ownership, a very focused customer service mentality." Like they said, "Well, yeah, you were a stewardess, so you could be a waitress." And that didn't sit right with her. So she, pursued her accountancy credentials. She continued to focus on her continuing education her entire life. I mean, even once she wound up at the CRA, so the Canadian version of the IRS, and she had, a 30+ year career in the public service of the federal government of Canada. But that entire time, she still pursued her own interests through local colleges. So I remember she did a cake decorating course. She did photography and eventually turned that photography course into a program following her passion, and eventually became certified as a professional photographer. And she has her own photography business now. She's retired. Right. So my mother, that's her journey. She is a non-traditional student. So when I had the opportunity to say, well, how can I take these technical skills that I've learned managing a publication and actually start something that's going to help people like my mom, it was a really easy opportunity for me. And that was 10 years ago. We had an idea. And today we have a publication that's probably the top source of information for non-traditional higher education, period.
Wow, what amazing story. I admire your mother's
Me too.
perseverance and and all the great efforts that it's just a really amazing career. I know that a lot of immigrants who first landed this country, right? Just like everybody else, regardless of where the origin country is. A lot of the job opportunities are not available for them, and they're
No.
in the Chinese community especially can only work in a laundromat, or they can do like in the service industry,
Yeah.
like a waiter, waitress, and kind of like relatively not like kind of like a blue collar, right? Industry. And then it's amazing story, and I am very passionate about photography as well.
Oh,
So yeah, please get me connected with your mother.
yeah, check out Simi. I think it's Simi Photos on Facebook. You can find her,
Okay.
and on LinkedIn or on Instagram rather as well. On LinkedIn, she's definitely not posting photos on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's amazing. I even get certified as a professional photographer. I'm looking forward to her, her arts and her work. And not to mention, her career in the federal government. That's really amazing. So that's another story for a different episode. Now let's focus
Yeah.
on you. So yeah, that's well, really, we, higher ed, the leaders, administrators, and board of trustees even really
Mhm.
had to dig into really what we are offering, right? Like you said, based on your story, what really helped you land it something meaningful and propel you into further like solid career
Mhm.
paths is the student work that you have been doing, working in the media sort of, right,
Yep.
the school papers, and and how you build up your management experience, and project management and the team management and people development even, right? Because I'm sure
Mhm.
the writers have different levels of writing
Yep.
skills. And
Well, I mean, you're talking about a lot of kids, right? You're talking about folks who
exactly.
are between first year and fourth year of university who are looking for something fun that they could do. This is all volunteer.
Right,
But
exactly.
you're coaching folks, you're helping them become better writers, you're looking at different, opportunities for them to cover new things. So yeah, no, absolutely.
Not to mention the leadership skills and mentoring, like you said, mentoring, coaching skills, and all those are sort of built up throughout the actual work that you have completed in managing that large team. So yeah, so I believe the workforce education and continue ed, professional studies, those this is a really important field. Um, what amazing journey. So yeah, so next question might be, let's dig a little deeper.
Okay.
Your identity of being a part of the AAPI community, and I'm just wondering and curious. It's totally up to you how much you want to share. Like we discussed before, um, you know, are there any obstacles that you have to sort of encounter, you encountered, or have to sort of fight over them, to
Mhm.
conquer those obstacles in your journey?
You know, I'm gonna address that first because what I want to talk about is that I think, well, I guess for me, would it be an ACPI community, like Asian Canadian Pacific? I don't know, maybe, but either way, I think it's an opportunity. I think there's a huge benefit to it. But I'll talk about the obstacles part first because I guess prejudice is an incredibly nuanced thing, and I would say for me, I mean, I'm a very large male, right? So when it comes to overt prejudice, I probably haven't faced it in the same way that I think a lot of our AAPI brothers and sisters have, um, because there's just it's a different world for someone who's my size, and I
You
can't
mean
speak
when
to.
you're tall and
Yeah, exactly.
male
I'm
and
6'4", 280 pounds. I
okay.
I'm not gonna, so at your average, uh, prejudiced person might not say what's on their mind. But at the same time, it's not out of the question that there's some kind of there's prejudice doesn't have to be overt. And I think this is something that I've learned over 10, 15, 20 years is someone who really, really tried to operate smoothly in a world that wasn't designed for me. Is that at a certain point, you just kind of, I found it easier to just ignore what might be in the back of my mind that like, well, you don't belong here. And at a certain point, you just have to decide, I guess, that you're not going to let that stop you. But that's also very easy for me to say because, as I mentioned, I'm very unlikely to face the kind of overt prejudice that a lot of folks do. By the same token, I'm very fortunate to work in the higher education space, right? I'm very, very fortunate at the fact that the industry I work in is arguably accurately or overrepresented by folks from the AAPI community. So receiving an email with my name isn't necessarily going to make someone think that it's coming from, some kind of email bank, or think, have them assume that it's junk mail, right? And I think we're also in an industry that happens to be very enlightened, right? We work with people who are extremely aware of these issues and are actively working on DEI approaches to overcome them and to address them. So even if some of those issues might be in the foreground, you're working with folks who are actively aware of them, as opposed to allowing issues like that to just be the norm. So it's difficult to say, like, I'm sure there are obstacles I've overcome. I have no doubt about that. But the funny thing is that I couldn't point to them, right? I couldn't point to an example of a time when I had to overcome some kind of, racial or religion-based prejudice, because I've been very fortunate in that way. On the flip side, as a first generation Indian Canadian, Punjabi Canadian, my childhood was characterized by a family of choice, right? My parents, when they arrived here, built a family of people from around the Ottawa community who also left their homes and their families to start a new life in Canada. Mm-hmm. So I didn't grow up with cousins, but I grew up with family friends. I didn't grow up with my actual uncles and aunties, but I grew up with uncles and aunties who we decided would be our family. Mm-hmm. And these are the folks that we went to picnics with, we had Thanksgiving with, we had Christmas with, right? And occasionally I'd meet their grandparents or I'd meet their cousins, but that was our community. We built a community for ourselves. And when I think about what that tells you about people, it means that I think when you come in with the right attitude, when you bring that energy that you want to be authentically part of someone's life, when you authentically want to be a community with them, that they'll respond very positively and they'll be in a community with you. So when I think about that, I think that's been a greater strength for me than almost any, overt benefit that I could have gotten from not being Indian, right? Like from not being Punjabi, because having that genuine faith in people and having that capacity to connect with folks who aren't necessarily blood kin, and to be able to recognize them as family, as friends very quickly is I think something that's really benefited me personally and professionally. So I don't know, it's a challenging question, right? What are the obstacles? Because I think in my instance, in my example, again, I went to a very traditional, very buttoned up university. I went to a very traditional buttoned up high school. I don't know that I've faced overt prejudice, but I've benefited from the community and from the mentality of being who I am and being from the community that I'm from.
That's thank you so much for sharing. It's really important for any first generation kids growing up in that kind of supportive community where you feel you belong. And like you said, you didn't grow up with blood related cousins and aunties and uncles, but with that supportive community, it's kind of like it's like your own people. Right?
Exactly.
And then you
100%.
celebrate the similar cultures, customs, and even sometimes speaking similar languages. That definitely helps. And people maybe this generation grew up here in Canada or North America, mm-hmm. Didn't feel the pressure that the grandparents or the parents faced, right? And they all know their own struggles in their own industry, right? And I really like the fact that you emphasized the mindset, right? It's not like we intentionally ignore that, regardless of how we look different, right? It's like we embrace the similar culture that is either Canadian or American, right? And then, we're people, we're human beings, right? We care about other people, not only in our own, community, but also, the big wild world,
Yeah.
like especially in the, higher ed institution, higher ed industry. We care about students, about their well-being, about their future. That's why, like your career path leads you to the evolution, being a leading continuing ed professional studies, a publication that help and assist and provide guidance and support for, the higher ed leaders, right? In pivoting their institution that have a huge impact for the students' life, because
Mhm.
they pay huge amount of tuition, and they want to get something out of it that can actually make a difference in their own life and in their own career journey, right?
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it's kind of interesting. I just want to add one more thing to that, which is I was thinking about the idea of like culture as practice as opposed to culture as a part, right? And so I have friends of mine who, we grew up together.
Hmm.
Friends of mine from Ottawa, both all from, Desi community who are also Indian. And, we still get together now as adults and we'll watch
Hmm.
Bollywood movies together.
Oh, that's
Oh,
awesome.
only a
I
few
love
of
it.
us actually speak Hindi. I don't, but it's something that we do together, and that we still enjoy that part of our lives together. And it's interesting to practice, to be focused on, we're going to share our identity together and we're going to do something that bonds us as a community, that you wouldn't necessarily do with your other friends. So it's, yeah, I was just thinking about that as you were talking at the start there, because that's it, when you find your people, when you can establish that community, it really does last for life. It really does it sticks around.
Well said, well said. And it's really, meaningful to have that kind of bond, right? Because you don't have to explain, don't have to introduce yourself,
Mhm.
because you just have that kind of immersion of that culture and customs and languages
Mhm.
there already, right? And that instant bond. And then for our audience who are listening to, this episode and to Amrit's amazing story and lived experiences, um, you know, we are part of our minority group, but we do not have to shy away from our culture, embracing our own culture and languages, right? And this is our pride. This is our,
Mhm.
privilege in some ways. And a lot of, our kids, for future generations are living in different minority communities, but, speaking multiple languages, and the this kind of experience is really really and precious, right, to help
Mhm.
them become global citizens for the future. And yeah, so I just want to emphasize that embrace our culture, wherever our heritage is originally from. And we are who we are, and we're Canadian, we're American, we're global citizens, and there's no way that, don't let anybody tell us that we don't belong, because we do.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Amrit, for sharing your amazing story and your life experiences. I'm sure our audience benefit a lot from your experience. And how would you like them to connect with you if if
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm at my name. I guess that's how LinkedIn works. I don't have a Twitter account, but you can follow the Modern Campus at the Modern Campus. And I mentioned my mom's photography a little earlier. She is a travel and fine art photographer. If you want to check out her work, she's on Instagram at Simmy, SIMMY dot photos, FO F no a PHOTOS. I'm an editor, I promise. That's simi.photos on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emrit, for sharing your wonderful experiences with us. And um, we look forward to connect with you soon again.
Please do. It was really great. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.